Some time ago, we talked about games in extensive form, which is basically a tree. And last lecture, we also talked about strategy, and we said that given Alif's strategies and Bob's strategies, we can use those strategies to kind of battle it out and find the outcome of the game. So in this lecture, we're going to talk about another way that we can write a game, which is a game in strategic form. Now, the key idea of this way to represent a game is that, well, maybe we don't really care what's going on within the game. We only care about the strategy that Alice and Bob use, and then we only care about the outcome of that game. So when we write game in strategic form for two players, it's going to be a matrix. And this is what happened then. So the row of the matrix is going to represent all possible strategies for a list. So these are going to be all pure strategy from player 1. From player 1. And then the column will represent all the possible pure strategies from player 2. Let me player 2. So let's say if I label my row S1 and so on to Sn, let's say like this is like S1, S2 and so on. And let's say I have this Si here and so on to Sn. So these are all the possible pure strategies from player 1. And then for my column, let me kind of move this a little bit here. So let's say T1 and so on to Tm. T1, T2, T3 and so on to Tm. These are the pure strategies from player 2. So these are the row and the column of my matrix now, and the entries of this matrix is going to be just the outcome of the game. For example, the outcome, the entry in the first row and the first column here, this is the outcome of the game. Let me actually use different color here. So let me make this purple. So in the first row and the first column, this is the outcome of the game. If the first player, so if player 1 play S1, so if the player 1 choose strategies of S1 and then player 2 use strategy S2, T1. So I'm just gonna put the outcome of the game here. And in the general case, the entry of the matrix in row I and in column J, this is gonna be, well, same thing here. The outcome of the game if the player 1 choose strategy Si and then player 2 choose strategy Tj. So let me just copy and paste this here. So in the general case, this is when player 1 choose Si and then player 2 choose Tj. So let's take a look at the example we have here. Well, this is actually the example that we had been seeing for a while now. So Alice choose head or tail, Bob choose head or tail, and then Alice pay Bob if the choice match. Otherwise, Bob pay Alice. So let's actually let me actually just copy what we had from last time here. So we already have a game tree for this game, and then we have already had all the pure strategy from Alice and Bob. So let me just copy and paste what we have from last time here. Ta-da! So we can kind of see that Alice has 2 pure strategies and Bob has 4 pure strategies. So my matrix here is going to be 2 by 4. So my matrix here is going to be 2 by 4. And then all pure strategy for Alice is going to be just S1 and S2 here. S1 and S2. And then the pure strategy for Bob is going to be just T1, T2, T3, and T4. Now, last time we already talked about the one possible outcome when Alice play S1 and Bob plays T2, and then it will end up here. So let me now go back and write the outcome of the game here. Let me kind of erase all this junk. Let me delete this part. Let me delete this part. earlier we see that Alice will pay Bob if their choice match. So the first outcome here, Alice will lose $1, Bob has 1, and then if their choice doesn't match, then Bob pay Alice $3. So it's going to be 3, negative 3, 3, negative 3, and then negative 1 and 1 here. Now, we see that if Alice play S1 and Bob plays T2, then we will end up being here, and then the outcome of the game is going to be negative 1, 1. So that means the entries in my first row and second column, which is here, is going to be just negative 1, 1 here. Yeah, and we can now do the same thing and fill in the rest of the rest of the matrix here. Let me kind of erase my green thingy here. Let me actually just move this out of the way. Delete that. Let me move this out of the way and delete that. Yeah, I don't really need this as well. Okay, good. So let me actually start from the first row and the first column. If Alice plays S1 and Bob plays T1, then what's gonna happen? You can kind of trace that from here. So that means Alice will choose head. Wait a minute, let me actually delete this. Alice will choose head, and then Bob will always play head, so we will end up being here. So, well, that's the same outcome that we have from earlier then. So that means the payoff is going to be just negative 1 and 1. Now, let's look at the entries in the first row and the third column here. So that means Alice plays S1 and Bob plays T3. Now, in this case, we can kind of see that Alice is going to choose head. Let me actually delete this. Alice is going to choose head, so we're going to be down here, and then Bob is going to choose opposite to Alice. So what's going to happen here is that Alice will choose head and Bob choose opposite from Alice. So we're going to end up at 3 and negative 3. So that's going to be my entries of the matrix. And then for the next entry, if Bob choose T4, so then Alice will play head and then Bob will always choose tail. So we're going to end up in the same entries here. So it's going to be 3 and negative 3. 3 and negative 3. Now, let's look at the second row then. For the second row, that means Alice is going to play S2 now. So Alice will choose tail. So if we look at the first column, so that means Alice is going to choose tail and then Bob will always choose head. So if Alice choose tail and Bob always choose head, we will end up being here. So the payoff is going to be 3 and negative 3. So it's going to be 3 and negative 3. For the second column, Bob will always choose the same as Alice. So let me actually delete this now. So Alice then is going to choose tail, and then Bob will choose the same as Alice. So it's going to be tail, tail, and then it's going to be negative 1, 1. So that's the entry of my matrix here. For the next one, Alice choose tail, and then Bob choose opposite to Alice. So now what that means is Alice will choose tail and Bob will choose head. So we'll end up being here. And then the payoff is going to be 3 and negative 3, 3 and negative 3. And for the last entry, we have Alice choose tail and then Bob also choose tail. So what that means is we will end up at this node and the payoff is going to be negative 1 and 1. Negative 1 and 1. So this is going to be the same game that we have here, but instead of writing it as a tree, we will write it as a matrix. And like I said earlier, in this strategic form, we don't really care what is going on within the game. We only now care what strategies that Alice used and what strategies that Bob used and what is the outcome of the game. Now let's look at the last example here. So again, this is the same example that we see from earlier. Let me do the same thing. I'm just gonna go ahead and copy and paste this. So this is from the last lecture, by the way. Okay. So now we see that Alice has 2 pure strategies and Bob has 2 pure strategies. So now my matrix is just gonna be a 2 by 2 matrix. And then my row then is gonna be S1 and S2. and then my column is going to be T1 and T2. T1 and T2. Now let me also go back and write the payoff for this metric. So it's going to be the same payoff that we see earlier. If it is the same, then Bob pay Alice is going to be -1 and 1 here, and then 3, -3 here, 3, -3 here, and then -1 and 1 here. So if Alice play S1, well, let me actually go back here. If Alice plays S1 and Bob plays T1, so that means Alice will choose head, and then Bob will always choose head. So we're going to end up being bot head. So the payoff is going to be -1 and 1 here. -1 and 1. If Alice plays S1 and Bob plays S2, so that means Alice will play head and Bob will play tail. So Alice plays head and Bob plays tail. So that's going to be 3 and -3. 3 and -3. And then if Alice plays S2 and Bob plays T1, that means Alice plays tail and Bob plays head. Alice plays tail and Bob plays head. The payoff is going to be 3 and -3. 3 and -3, right? Sorry. 3 and -3. And then for the last entries, Alice plays tail, Bob plays tail, so it's going to be -1, 1. So again, this is a game in strategic form of the same game that we see earlier. Now let me actually kind of go back up there. So from now on, we are usually going to write a game in this strategic format because it's going to be easier to analyze the strategy that each player is going to use. And let me also say that for 2 players, the game can be written as a matrix, but if we have more players, that means we will have more dimension, and our game is going to get a lot more complicated. For example, with 3 players, we're going to have like a 3-dimension matrix, and with 4 players, it's going to be 4 dimension. So you can kind of imagine this is going to get pretty complicated real fast here.